All right. My name's Ted Shultz. I'm with Apex Environmental Management Incorporated out of Malden, South Carolina. We're an environmental industrial hygiene consulting firm. We do a lot of mold inspections, mainly because people call us going, there doesn't seem to be anything as far as licensing. You guys are licensed with all the, we hold license for asbestos and lead, and my wife is a CIH, a certified industrial hygienist. She stamps off on a lot of stuff that we do our testing, but we don't do any physical labor. We do testing. We send all our samples off to labs. We get the results back. We draw up a report, provide recommendations on things that need, and this is for lead, this is for asbestos or mold, or we do safety plans for industries. But we do a lot of stuff with trying to keep people, companies, and industry within lots of different governmental agencies, try to keep them all legal, make sure they're in compliance with things. But I end up doing a lot of mold inspections, both for residential, for commercial, in churches and public buildings. But been doing that sort of work for about 10 or 12 years now. Our company probably has about 40 years combined experience, but basically, as far as mold goes, with the inspections that we do, say it's a residential house, we'll figure out what sort of square footage we're talking about, how many levels, is it on a slab, is it in a crawl space. We do air samples for indoor activity. In crawl spaces and attics, we would take surface samples like swabs. All the sampling would go off to a third-party laboratory. There's a lab that I like to use in Greenville. There's the MSL out of Charlotte that we send a lot of stuff to, and SAI, CEI, there's lots of different acronyms for different laboratories. And I know it came up in the last meeting, it's like, well, what does this stuff cost? That stuff is all completely negotiable. That depends on the size of the project. I mean, if an individual came in and had 2 samples, it might cost them $40 or $50 a piece. If you're sending in 4,000 at a time, obviously that number goes down. But you get on site, you do physical inspections, you go in the crawl space, you go in attics, and basically we develop the way we do our inspections to the level that we would be doing things such as asbestos and lead. Since there wasn't any legislation in place or any regulation at all, we just did it, say, okay, with those things, if you're going to do the inspections, you can't do the remediation or the abatement work. Specifically with like asbestos, if we do the inspection, we can do air monitoring for like project oversight on that, but you can't do any abatement work. It's a completely separate thing. It's a conflict of interest. And it seems like that's coming up in y'all's discussions, and I would absolutely urge y'all, make sure the conflict of interest verbiage is in what you do. Because there is the stuff that you're talking about with these shady fly-by-night stuff, they're out there. And I get calls from people that have been scammed and said, hey, we paid somebody for this, and hey, they did this test or they did this test and this. Well, they got a bunch of information that, say you've got a 1,500 square foot house and you come in and do 1 air sample inside and give somebody a report on that. Well, that's not a scientific comparison. That's not an experiment. You need to figure out what the square footage is, how the house is divided up, do the appropriate number of sampling inside, which is probably at least minimum going to be 2. But then you got to go outside. Take a sample out front, take a sample out back. You've got a control sample to compare against. And that way you've got controls in place, and you've actually completed a scientific experiment that can give you some legitimate information. Also getting moisture levels and temperature levels from multiple places inside the home, taking moisture readings in wood. There's a whole gamut of information that we collect to make our reports. But it seems like you guys are going to write up some stuff to do. We're doing this already. We've got boots on the ground and more than happy to help. We've got contacts with people that do this sort of work, and lots of people in the field that can be invaluable to y'all in your endeavor to write some things on paper. Because if once you write it on paper and call it a hazardous material, well, then you've got to get stuff in place for education. You've got to set up classes. You've got to set up, okay, different certification for an inspector, different certification for someone who's going to be an abatement worker, different certification for somebody who's going to supervise those things. These are all different certifications. It's all different class material that's going to have to be developed. We're out here. We do this stuff. Most of the stuff with the classes. A lot of that information we've already got on hand. It would just take, I don't know, several months to put it together and actually say, boom, here you go. Here's some class material that you guys can do to make some certifications. Stuff with mold. You talk about the like immunocompromised. I mean, with asbestos and lead, you've got PEL levels, like personal exposure level. And with mold, it's a moving target because one person can roll around in it and they don't have any problems with it. The next person walks into a house and 5 minutes later they got to walk back outside because they're having some sort of an allergic response and they can't breathe very well. That makes it hard to say, okay, well, what's the level of, okay, this level of mold spores in this room is okay and this level's not. It's a moving target, and you've got different factors for seasonal temperatures. I mean, the numbers that you're going to get on your test in January are going to be a whole lot different than what you get in August. And those things, that's all factored in, and really, and it would be different state to state. There might even be some variations within our state, and mold is a problem throughout in the upstate, the Midlands, down the PD, down the low country. It's everywhere. And the flooding makes it worse, obviously, and I know it came up with encapsulation of crawl spaces and things like that, and that in certain situations that stuff can be a really good idea. Certain situations, or if it's done poorly, it can be a terrible mess. But I just wanted to make myself available. I've got resources that can be of great assistance to y'all. Does anybody have any questions for me? Like I say, I'm honored to be here and speak to y'all today.
Representative, thank you, Mr. Shultz.
Yes, ma'am.
Had I known you were coming from Malden, we could have carpooled.
Yeah.
Greenville County.
Got to go back short.
Appreciate it. Representative Forrest.
You said it's a moving target, and because just like you said, it might affect one person and not affect someone else. Whenever you test for mold in a residence or commercial building, what is your, you just lay it online, say this is what we have as far as parts per million on your mold, and this is what happens on, I mean, right, what is your criteria right there for what your suggestion is? The
information that we get back from the laboratory from the samples that we've taken, which is always going to be a measured amount of air through a cassette, we've got pumps that we calibrate before we start each time. You calibrate them when you're done, that sort of thing. So you know you're taking accurate samples throughout. So I might have 4 different pumps running in different rooms just to keep it rolling. But you take that information, you get other information as parts per million on carbon dioxide, relative humidity in the room, temperature in the room. Basically what you're really looking for, since it is a moving target and there isn't a number, good rule of thumb is you want to be lower inside than you are outside for all the spore counts that came back with any concentrations at all. That, and you also want to have nothing growing inside that isn't already found outside. Now, if you've got concentrations of molds that are growing inside your house that don't show up on outside samples, yeah, you got a water problem. That's a good rule of thumb. There's, like I say, with seasonal factors, I mean, what shows up as 65,000 spores in August might show up as 100 in January. So that's where an experience factor comes in. With it being a moving target, there should be some licensing, there should be some experience required there. I mean, because there are a lot of people out there that are just robbing people.
Wow.
And are they licensed? Some are, some aren't. There's always going to be people that are looking for that deal that they can't afford to get it done. So the handyman Bob that works on the weekends when he's off and gets some stuff done, well, he might be a really honest guy, but he might also not really know what he's doing, how to clean up after it, how to encapsulate things. I mean, once you've done it and you wash something off, and people using bleach, and that's really not good. But anyway, I digress. I could bore you all day with this stuff, but
All right.
did I answer you?
I think so. It's just, but I mean, it's a big opportunity there for a big gray area for a judgment call. Basically, it's no one size fits all for everyone. I mean, Representative Kirby might, like you said, he might have to walk out of the room after 5 minutes, and I can be in there all day and it wouldn't affect me. Basically.
And for the longest time, I said, oh, that's just hooey. And a couple of years ago, we do a lot of inspections for houses that are going to be demolished. We do it all over Southeast. But walked into a house with my boss, and I wasn't in there 5 minutes, and I started coughing. And I stayed in there about another 2 minutes, and I was coughing and coughing. I said, man, I've got to go outside. Went outside. 10 minutes later, I was fine. That's the only reaction to mold I think I've ever, and I don't know that it was mold. I just assumed that it was the house was falling in, the roof's already caved through, the floor's falling in. Basically, the house is going to be demolished. But it was just lots of black, green, red. I mean, there's all sorts of different colors of mold. But whatever was growing in there that day had that effect on me, so I have experienced it. But to my knowledge, that's the only time I've ever had an experience like that. But it does happen.
Thank you.
Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Thanks for coming. It was very informative, and I think really kind of gets at a lot of the point of some of the concerns that you've heard today. Could you just clarify or expound upon? You mentioned that y'all frequently are called to do mold inspection type work. Who's your typical customer, and for what reason are they calling you generally?
I mean, we do it for both for commercial and residential and municipal people. All three of those, we do a lot of churches. There's a lot of older churches, and of course there's always financial restraints on what they can do and what they can't. And as long as roofs keep leaking and water keeps getting in buildings, there's going to be mold. And the longer those issues of maintenance are deferred, the worse it's going to get. And some people say, oh, I should have called you so much sooner, and you find out, well, the leak started a week ago. Then you get their next call, oh yeah, this leak started about 3 years ago, but we just didn't worry about it. Well, they got a real problem. And what their problem is going to cost a good bit more to take care of, but it was deferred. It's the same thing with municipal buildings and schools and things. I mean, if you wait till something's a problem and then you keep putting Band-Aids on that problem, yeah, then you're going to have a real bill. Lots of dollars outlaid to fix those areas. Whereas if something was established where you set up a schedule, say once a year or whatever, and somebody on staff can be trained to do something, but they're actually making an inspection of what's going on in that area, and they're writing it down to say, yeah, there's water leaks here, or you can see it coming through the wall here. That stuff gets written down. Then it can get addressed rather than, yeah, we'll just paint over it. We'll put up a new ceiling tile. Those things are what makes, particularly in schools and hell, hospitals, all sorts of things. People say, well, we don't have any mold in our house. We've done mold inspections in a NICU unit during an open heart surgery on an infant, and that's clean room. It's got its own sealed HVAC system with HEPA filters going. I mean, you're not going to get any cleaner air than that. There's mold in there too. I mean, there's no place on our planet that you're going to go that you're not breathing mold in with every breath. And people say, well, so why is it bothering people now than it never did before? Well, pretty much everything on the planet except humans go under the guise of survival of the fittest. And mold's no different. The ones that grow get stronger. The molds get stronger, and humans are kind of getting weaker. Our allergies are getting worse. And when I grew up, I knew like 2 people that had, like one with a strawberry allergy and 2 that had peanut allergies. Well, now you can't even take a peanut butter sandwich to school because there's so many kids that are allergic to peanut butter, my daughter being one. There's a swing going on. But that's why all these things keep getting worse for people, and people keep saying, that's another part of this too with these buildings. It's like the complaints that come in from teachers or employees, the absenteeism, workers' comp cases, a lot of it comes from perception. Well, if there's a spot on the ceiling and that spot's been there and it keeps getting worse, and they put a band on it and it comes back, well, that person gets angry. Then they start complaining about it. Then they're going to the doctor. It's much cheaper in the long run to fix it to begin with. And if you start doing inspections along the way and keep that stuff going, you've got a better handle on things, and you'll save the state a lot of money in the long run.
Mr. Shultz, can you make any type estimate of how many contractors are around the state of South Carolina who specialize in this as you do?
I know, like, my wife's certification is certified industrial hygienist. The last time I was told, I think there's about 35 in South Carolina. Now, there's nothing to say people doing mold inspections have to have something like that. Like I say, she's got a master's in industrial hygiene. She's taken her CIH exam, that sort of thing. Those type certifications get a lot of that sort of work with regulatory agencies to make sure everybody's staying legal. There's companies out there doing remediation that go out and say, oh yeah, we'll come out, we'll do an inspection. We'll also do the work. There's nothing to say that they can at this point.
Yeah, and with your company, I guess, is currently licensed through DHEC. Would that be the idea, not through LLR?
With asbestos and lead?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're just performing the mold inspections as kind of an auxiliary function of the company.
And all the inspections that we do of that nature, they're all stamped off by a CIH. It's same sort of stamp like a PE, professional engineer, would have.
To your knowledge, has there been any discussion from DHEC, through DHEC, or by DHEC regarding your performing mold inspections anywhere around the state?
No. I mean, and we do, I mean, we work all over the place, but we're also hold municipal licenses for business license, probably, I don't know, 13, 14.
Are there trade groups associated with mold inspection?
There are. I couldn't give you any acronyms or anything like that. I mean, I know there's companies out there that are doing training and offering certifications. Now, they're not backed up by any governmental entity.
The certifications are like certificate kind of
It
things?
said that we've been trained in mold or processes for mold remediation or abatement. I mean, like I said, there's nothing to back it up from a governmental standpoint, but those sorts of organizations are gaining ground, and then with legislation in place, the herd would thin.
Ms. Shultz, thank you. Appreciate your time and being here with us today.
Anybody else have, Mr. Shultz, I appreciate you coming. And I just want to be clear, because you said something in the very beginning. While we don't have any licensure or mention mold abatement, I believe you said because you operate and do asbestos and lead, and we've learned how to abate those things along the way, you're using some of those same protocols of testing that you would those.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it would benefit our state if we added mold to that list or not?
Well, from like what I described as far as setting up some sort of inspection, as far as like a maintenance punch list that gets done once a year, gets turned in, those are going to identify problems that may just get Band-Aids for years that end up being huge problems. I mean, and that's completely, I don't know, off subject as far as like your flood emergencies and that sort of thing. But from, any set of schools, set of courtrooms, set of whatever, having inspections in place, looking at it, writing it down, tracking it, that's going to bring things to light that would stay under the cover of darkness. They would get addressed, get taken care of before they become humongous issues, like knocking buildings down that didn't need to be.
Do you operate outside of the state of South Carolina in other states?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We do safety inspections for the Army National Guard. We do that throughout the southeast of the country. We've got industrial clients that maybe we got hooked up with through somewhere in South Carolina that have other plants that they'll fly us all over the country to do stuff wherever we're needed.
Have you operated in a state that does have more guidelines than South Carolina? That have guidelines, let me put it that way, because we don't have any.
Different guidelines. I don't know that I'd say more. We did a bunch of work for Michelin out in Oklahoma and also in Alabama. We also did it in, where's South Bend, Michigan. So, I mean, yeah, you gotta get involved with what, like our equivalent would be DHEC here.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma has I think it's Oklahoma Department of Labor covers that area that would
Okay.
be covered under that sort of thing. But yeah, every state's got their own. Some different local municipalities have their own. Like if you work in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, they got a whole different set of rules than even the state of North Carolina.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming to talk with us and for being available to us to help us with this work.
More than
Anybody-
welcome. Honored to be here.
Okay.
Any other questions or anything?
Anybody-
Thank you very much.
Okay.